Let's stop sugarcoating the situation and look at the truth that most people are too afraid to voice. As a super empath, you are a natural lightning rod for avoidant personalities. It is a common misconception that this happens because you are too much, too needy, or somehow broken. In reality, the opposite is true. You are a magnet for the emotionally guarded precisely because of your strength and your light. You possess an emotional radar so incredibly sharp that you can detect shifts in a room before a single word is spoken. You don't just hear what people say, you feel the heavy weight of the things they are hiding. This gift allows you to radiate a safe harbor energy, a rare, grounding presence that silently whispers to others, "I see the real you, and you are safe with me." To an avoidant person who has spent their entire life living behind a thick wall of armor, terrified of being truly known, that glow is completely irresistible. You are likely the only person they have ever met who has the power to make their walls shake. And while that feels like a miracle to them at first, it is exactly where the invisible trap begins to set. This attraction isn't just a coincidence. It is a calculated, subconscious pull toward the very thing each person lacks. You, as a super empath, have a soul that craves profound emotional depth. You aren't interested in small talk or surface-level connections. You want to touch the bottom of someone's heart. Avoidants, despite their cold, detached, or even robotic exterior, actually carry massive amounts of emotion buried deep under layers of paralyzing fear. This is the hook that snags you every single time. You look at them and you don't see a cold person. You see a wounded child. You see their hidden pain, their unhealed childhood scars, and that shimmering, untapped potential for a love they've never been able to express. Where most people would see a closed door and walk away, you see a locked treasure chest. Instead of running for the hills, you lean in closer. You feel an almost spiritual calling to stay, believing that if you can just provide enough safety and enough understanding, you can be the one to finally unlock them. This creates what we call the addictive puzzle piece dynamic, but it's a puzzle that usually leads to a dead end. The avoidant person finds you addictive because you offer a level of acceptance they've never experienced, making them feel like they've finally found a home. But for you, the challenge of reaching them becomes its own kind of drug. You become wired to overgive, to pour every ounce of your emotional labor into the relationship, while they are naturally wired to self-protect and retreat the moment things get too real. It is a tragic magnetic pull where your desire to heal meets their desire to hide. You view the relationship as a mission of mercy, but what's actually happening is a subconscious dance. You are providing the emotional regulation they can't provide for themselves, and they are providing you with a project that keeps you from having to look at your own needs. Neither side fully understands the depth of this entanglement until the honeymoon phase fades and the cycle of longing, withdrawal, and intense emotional pain begins to take over your life. To truly understand the avoidance perspective, you have to realize that being pursued by a super empath is the ultimate double-edged sword. For them, meeting you is both the best and worst thing that could ever happen. On one hand, it feels incredibly safe because your love is genuine, deep, and unconditional. They sense that you aren't like the others. You aren't looking to judge them or play games. You offer a level of acceptance they have craved their entire lives, but never dared to ask for. However, that same safety is exactly what makes you so threatening. To an avoidant, true intimacy isn't a goal, it's their greatest fear. While you see closeness as a beautiful connection, they see it as a loss of control. The more you love them, the more at risk they feel, because they have spent years convincing themselves that staying distant is the only way to stay safe from being hurt or disappointed. As a super empath, you have a unique, almost supernatural ability to regulate their internal chaos. You pick up on their subtle energy shifts, the slight tensing of their shoulders, or the change in their tone before they even realize they are stressed. Without them saying a word, you step in to soothe their anxiety and smooth over the rough edges of their day. You become their emotional anchor, and they are drawn to you like a moth to a flame, because you provide a sense of calm they cannot create for themselves. But here is where the terror sets in. The moment they realize they are starting to depend on you for that calm, they panic. They feel seen in a way that feels like being exposed under a spotlight. To them, being understood so deeply doesn't feel like a hug. It feels like a threat to their survival. This panic triggers a desperate need to reclaim their walls. They begin to fear being engulfed or losing their hard-won independence. They worry that if they let you all the way in, they will disappear into you, or worse, that you will eventually see the broken parts of them and leave. To prevent that imaginary catastrophe, they push you away. This is the moment where the distance grows, the texts get shorter, and the walls go back up. It's crucial to understand that they aren't withdrawing because they don't care about you or because you did something wrong. They are withdrawing because closeness to their nervous system feels like a life-threatening danger. Their brain is screaming at them to run for cover, not because the love is bad, but because the vulnerability required to sustain that love feels like standing on the edge of a cliff without a harness. The tragedy of this dance is that the more you try to reassure them with your empathy, the more dangerous you become. When you lean in to ask what's wrong or try to offer even more support, the avoidant feels cornered. They interpret your care as pressure and your intuition as an invasion of privacy. They start to view your presence as a cage rather than a sanctuary. They might lash out, become cold, or vanish for days, leaving you confused and heartbroken. In their mind, they are just trying to breathe again, trying to find that familiar space of isolation where nobody can reach their heart. They are trapped in a cycle where they desperately want the warmth of your flame, but the moment they get close enough to feel it, they are terrified of being burned alive. This dynamic is far more than just a case of bad chemistry or picking the wrong person. It is a deep subconscious replay of your earliest years. It is an echo from a time when you were still learning how the world works and what you had to do to be loved. Most super empaths didn't just wake up one day with an emotional radar. They developed it as a survival mechanism in childhood. Many grew up in environments where they had to become hyper-aware of the adults around them just to stay safe. Maybe you had a parent who was emotionally unpredictable, someone whose moods could shift from calm to explosive in a heartbeat. To survive that, you learned to read the room before you even walked into it. You became an expert at anticipating everyone else's needs and managing their emotions, often at the expense of your own. You learned very early on that if you could keep everyone else happy and regulated, then you would be okay. This shaped you into a compassionate adult, but it also wired you to believe that love is something you have to work for, something you have to earn by being a fixer, a healer, or a peacekeeper. On the other side of this coin, the avoidant was living a very different childhood story that led them to the exact same crossroads. While you were learning to lean in and fix things, they were learning to shut down and hide. Avoidants often grew up with caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or even punished them for showing vulnerability. When they cried, they might have been told to toughen up, or when they reached out for connection, they were met with coldness or neglect. To survive that pain, they built a fortress around their hearts. They learned that relying on other people was dangerous and that showing need was a sign of weakness. They became hyper-independent, convincing themselves that they didn't need anyone and that their inner world was a private territory where no one else was allowed. By the time they reached adulthood, shutting down wasn't just a choice, it was their default setting for safety. When these two worlds finally collide, your survival instincts click together like a lock and key. The moment you meet an avoidant, your fixer instinct goes into overdrive. You sense their buried pain and their guarded heart, and to you that feels like a mission you were born to complete. You feel an intense, almost magnetic urge to rescue them from their own walls. Deep down, you believe that if you can just love them enough to make them open up, it will finally prove that you are worthy, valuable, and enough. You are essentially trying to win a game you lost as a child by fixing a person who reminds you of the very people who couldn't love you properly back then. To you, the avoidant isn't a red flag. They are a familiar challenge that feels like home, even if that home was never actually peaceful. For the avoidant, meeting you feels like a miracle that quickly turns into a nightmare. They are initially soothed by your intensity and your warmth. It's like they've been in the dark for years and you are the first person to turn on the lights. But because they were never taught how to handle that much emotional light, they quickly feel overwhelmed. They don't know how to reciprocate the depth you are offering because they never learned the language of vulnerability. Your desire for closeness feels like pressure to them, and your intuition feels like an invasion of their carefully guarded privacy. This is the tragic irony of the connection. You aren't actually falling in love with a person. You are falling into a familiar, painful pattern. You are both unconsciously reenacting your childhood traumas, hoping for a different ending this time, without realizing that you are trapped in a loop where one person is desperately trying to save a soul that is desperately trying to stay hidden. The single most difficult pill for a super empath to swallow is the realization that emotional intensity is not the same thing as true intimacy. When you are locked in a cycle with an avoidant, the relationship feels incredibly high stakes. The constant push and pull, the late-night deep conversations, followed by days of icy silence, and the desperate longing to bridge the gap create a chemical rush in your brain. You mistake this roller coaster for passion. You tell yourself that the pain you feel is just a sign of how deep your connection is. But here is the brutal truth. You aren't experiencing a deep connection. You are experiencing a trauma bond. You have become addicted to the intermittent reinforcement of their attention. Because the avoidant is so consistently distant and emotionally unavailable, every tiny crumb of affection they throw your way, a rare compliment, a sudden moment of vulnerability, or a weekend where they actually show up, feels like a magnificent feast to your starving heart. This breadcrumbing keeps you hooked, waiting and hoping for the next breakthrough that you believe is just around the corner. You stay in this cycle because your empathy acts like a superpower with no off switch. You look at this person and you don't see their coldness or their lack of effort. You see the soul beneath the armor. You see the wounded child they once were and the incredible person they could be if they just felt safe enough to let go of their fear. You convince yourself that you are the only one with the key to their heart, the only one patient and loving enough to finally save them. This is the healer trap. It is a subtle form of ego that makes you believe your love is so powerful it can override someone else's lifelong defense mechanisms. You pour your energy into them like water into a cracked vase, thinking that if you just pour faster and more intensely, the vase will eventually hold water. But the cold reality that no one wants to tell you is that no matter how much you give, you cannot heal someone who refuses to be seen. You are essentially trying to perform heart surgery on someone who won't even take off their coat. Intimacy requires two people to be standing in the light, but in this dynamic, you are the only one holding the lantern while they hide in the shadows. You cannot love someone into wholeness if they are not actively doing the heavy lifting of their own inner work. Healing is an inside job, and by trying to do it for them, you are actually preventing them from facing their own patterns. You have to understand that your help is often functioning as an enabler for their avoidance. As long as you are there to bridge the gap, fix the problems, and manage the emotions for both of you, they have no reason to change. You are drowning yourself while trying to be a life raft for someone who isn't even trying to swim. The hardest lesson you will ever learn is that your empathy was never meant to be a tool for fixing broken people. It was meant to be a gift for those who are ready to meet you in the middle. Until you accept that their healing is not your responsibility, you will remain a prisoner to a potential that will never become a reality. It is time to accept a truth that will change the trajectory of your life. Your empathy is sacred, but it is not a lifeline for people who are content with drowning. For too long, you have been told, or you have told yourself, that your value lies in how much you can give, how much you can endure, and how many broken souls you can piece back together. But being a super empath does not give you a mandate to tolerate emotional starvation. You were not put on this earth to survive on the crumbs of affection left behind by someone too afraid to love you back. Reclaiming your light starts with the radical realization that your energy is a finite, precious resource, and you are allowed to put a guard at the gate. You have to stop viewing your ability to see the potential in people as a reason to stay in situations that leave you feeling empty and drained. When you use your light only to illuminate the darkness in others, you eventually run out of fuel for yourself. The cycle of attracting avoidance only breaks the moment you stop chasing and start choosing. Chasing is a survival response. It is the frantic need to prove you are worthy by winning over someone who is pulling away. Choosing, however, is an act of power. It is looking at a dynamic and asking, is this person actually meeting my needs, or am I just addicted to the hope that they might one day? When you stop the chase, you create a space for the truth to settle in. You must refuse to fix those who have no interest in fixing themselves. By stepping back and protecting your peace, your light undergoes a massive transformation. It stops being a beacon for people who are looking for a free emotional therapist or a human shield against their own shadows. When you stop being a project manager for other people's lives, you stop being a magnet for broken dynamics. By guarding your gift, you fundamentally shift the frequency of who you attract into your orbit. When you set boundaries and demand emotional reciprocity, you become unattractive to avoidance because they realize they can't use you to regulate their chaos without giving anything in return. This is a good thing. It clears the stage for partners who can actually meet your depth, people who are already standing in their own light and aren't looking for you to carry theirs for them. You shift from finding projects to finding equals. You start attracting people who don't see your empathy as a tool to be used, but as a treasure to be honored. This shift only happens when you finally believe that you don't need to earn love by being a healer, a martyr, or a saint. The most important lesson you will ever learn is that you deserve love simply because of who you are, not because of what you can do for someone else. You are enough without the fixing, without the saving, and without the overgiving. When you reclaim your light, you aren't just protecting yourself from further heartbreak. You are finally giving yourself the same fierce, unconditional love you've been trying to give everyone else. You are teaching the world how to treat you by showing them that your heart is no longer an open door for anyone who isn't willing to walk through it with respect and intention. Your light was never meant to be a lighthouse for every passing ship in a storm. It was meant to burn brightly for the life you are building for yourself. In the end, you have to realize that your journey as a super empath isn't about learning how to love harder. It's about learning who is actually worthy of that love. You have spent so much time trying to reach the darkest corners of someone else's heart that you've neglected the light in your own. The moment you stop being a magnet for broken love is the moment you decide that your energy is no longer up for grabs. You aren't a project manager for other people's trauma, and you aren't an emotional crutch for those who refuse to walk on their own. When you finally learn to guard your heart, your empathy stops being a burden and starts being your greatest source of power. It allows you to stop settling for a life of emotional starvation and start attracting the deep, reciprocal, and healthy connection you've always known was possible. If this message resonates with you, it's time to stop the cycle and start choosing yourself. If you're ready to reclaim your power and learn how to navigate these complex emotional dynamics without losing your soul in the process, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. We are diving deep into the psychology of healing, boundaries, and how to turn your empathy into your greatest strength. Don't forget to like this video and share your story in the comments below. Have you ever felt trapped in the empath avoidant dance? Let's talk about it and heal together. Your journey to a love that actually feeds you starts right here, right now.